Their third film with David Fincher is Gone Girl, following Girl with the Dragon Tattoo and The Social Network. And here to lead our keynote is music editor of The Hollywood Reporter and Billboard, Shirley Halperin, along with Trent Reznor and Atticus Ross.
I mean, our process with David begins trying to understand what he's looking for the role of music in the film. Our first role is really to kind of listen, you know, and let him talk as much as we can and talk about his feelings for the film, and you get a sense of the role that music's going to play. Is it backdrop? Is it part of the scenery? Once we familiarize ourselves with the material, we get a sense of the tone from David in a rough framework of what we think he wants. Then we go off and spend several weeks just composing sketches, ideas that feel like it would emotionally belong in what we think that the world of this film was going to be. Then we run that by him, and we get an idea of what feels close to the mark and what doesn't, and then we kick more into, and at that point, we get a better read from him in terms of how, you know, the drama meter. Is it hovering at 3 or can it go up to 11? So it really is a collaborative back and forth thing where we feel our role here is just to help realize his vision the best we can.
And to paraphrase something he said the other night, it's not like he looks at it like, here's the house, can you splash some paint on the walls? It's much more about working from the foundation up, so being involved in tandem with the editing, with everything else. And I think on that, it means, A, we're able, I think, to get something that we're really proud of at the end of the day, but B, be prepared to commit an awful lot of time to the project to achieve that.
You mentioned this idea of a false sincerity, which I think is that kind of music. Can you explain how do you make bad music sound good in this context?
It's easy to make bad music in general. Now, that's a good example of something that sets us down a path that differentiates between other things. You know, we familiarize ourselves with the material. In this case, we were sitting with David, and he said, you know, this could be a really bad idea, but what about, you know, and that's prefaced several things that have turned out pretty great, you know, along in our working together. But this one, it's set against the context of the movie, which is about, in a lot of ways, presenting facades to the outside world, to your partner in marriage, etc. This false sense of a way to make something seem a certain way, but as we see in the film, those facades start to give way, and what's underneath is not quite so pleasant. So we took that back, and that seemed like a good thing to start with. So the very first things that we embarked upon in terms of composing was thinking, okay, this feels the most foreign. Let's start there and just see where the trail leads. And it was one of those things that felt uncomfortable, and the voicing of the chords and the sounds we started with would not be where we would instinctually go. And it led us down a path that we found was pretty interesting, and fortunately, David felt the same way, and set the tone for how this project would feel a bit different.
Trent, you worked on this while on tour? During breaks? How did you work out the time? Because you had a lot of commitments in the last couple of years with 9 Inch Nails.
Yeah, I had such a great experience working with David and Atticus on Social Network and Dragon Tattoo that I tried to keep my schedule open to see what David's next project was going to be so that I could be involved in that, because it really is, it's been inspirational, educational, it's been interesting to apply my skill set into a different medium and learn about, it's just interesting, and it's affected me in a lot of ways, mostly positive. So there was an elaborate plan that everything worked out perfect, where David was going to be doing a different film that started actually right now. So we booked a 9 Inch Nails tour that ended about a month ago or so. And then that project changed, and it turned into Gone Girl, and it landed exactly on the tour that I just finished booking. So yeah, there was no way I was going to not do it, so we had to figure out a way to fit it in around touring schedule. And at the end of the day, and again, this might just be justification now, but I think it was better because it allowed us to work in intense bursts and then be away from it for several week periods while I'm in Europe touring, for example, and come back and refocus. And we had an objectivity that we, in hindsight, sometimes don't have in, say, a project like Dragon Tattoo, where for pretty much a year solid, we worked constantly, and on a project of that scale, sometimes it's hard to figure out what you're doing because you're so deep in the weeds with it.
This is now your third movie, so you're no longer a novice. You can't really use that as an excuse, but it doesn't get easier over time? The experience doesn't make it easier?
Well, Social Network, the underlying kind of theme during the composition was there was an undercurrent of terror because I didn't know what I was doing, And I'm proud of how that came out, but it very much was, when we got invited to do that, I was hesitant because I didn't want to screw up on his movie. I didn't want to be the guy that, with this team of great filmmakers, was the dragging everybody down. So that isn't quite as loud amount of terror as there was in the first film. But when we start a new project, whether it be a Nine Inch Nails record or a film, whatever it is, we attempt to define that by its own set of rules so that it has its own identity. And we might deploy different means of composing. We might segregate certain instruments that we choose to use versus others. Your limit is your imagination, So by limiting our options often and spending an important amount of time at the beginning of the process thinking about how can this have its own thing, how can it feel like its own piece of music, that adds to a sense of it always feeling a little bit uncomfortable. If it gets too familiar, it feels like cheating to me. It feels like treading water and,
Well, Billboard's Joe Levy asked you, Trent, if Randy Newman were to call tomorrow and say, I need a really scary character for this Disney movie, do you take the call? And you said, yes. You like to get out of your comfort zone. But I wanted to ask, is it possible for your work to be anything other than dark? You live here in Los Angeles. Here we are at Universal where, cartoons and sunshine is blaring outside. But is the soundtrack running through your head just inherently minor chords and Metal
Pitch
Machine
black.
Music, doom and gloom?
Yes. There's no smiling inside my head,
I can't see you doing the song from Despicable Me. I don't know. I could be wrong, but...
That's an interesting thing you bring up. The artist in me is interested in seeing what I'm capable of. I don't know if I could do that. I can hear a score like Despicable Me and be amazed at what it is and appreciative of it. I don't know if I'm able to do that. The technician, in me, the person that wants to learn things and try new methodologies, is interested to see if I'm capable of doing that. But I have no idea if I could work in that field. So I don't know.